Success in Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome to the Financial Survival Network. It's our second show of the young new year. It's January 5th, 2015. It's Manipulation Monday. That means it's time for Andrew Hoffman, and he is loaded with predictions, with observations, and with evidence of what's happening right now. Andy, Happy New Year.
And the same to you, and to all the people who listen. Good for you for listening to one of the best radio networks out there. And obviously people who are listening are thinking about protecting themselves if they haven't already. And if there's ever been a time to do it, it is now. And I can't scream louder now. The one thing that the powers that be can control are physical markets that they can't control the supply and demand of. And right now we're already seeing such incredible tightness in the physical gold and silver markets, based on the record demand, the backwardization, the depleting inventories, and of course the fact that they're going to deplete a lot faster with what's going on in the world right now. But if you want to look to a real Achilles heel, I've always called silver the Achilles heel of the monetary system. But if you want to look at a linchpin, an Achilles heel that literally will destroy everything that the worst people in the world have been doing, it is the oil market. And I wrote back 3 months ago now, I wrote, crashing oil prices portend unspeakable horrors. And the unspeakable horrors means a total and utter loss of control of everything that these financial, monsters have been doing. And you're seeing it right now, crashing currencies, which I predicted last year, meaning not this year, but last year, crashing commodity prices in many cases already at the 2008 lows. And in other cases, they're about to crash through. I can't be more terrified now. And frankly, I wrote this morning, I am more terrified now than I was in 2008.
Well, the only difference is here, I think maybe they're a bit prepared for what's going to happen. Andy, I think they know what's going to happen now. Well,
being prepared, it's like, but saying being prepared for thunderstorm when you're out in the storm without an umbrella, to say, well, yeah, I'm ready. I know if there's a storm, I'm going to get an umbrella. But the point is they don't have an umbrella. They may not have been, quote, prepared in 2008, but the fact is they had dry powder. They did have the ability to make the world believe that by printing a lot of money that they could save it. And that said, they also had, the central banks had limited balance sheets so that they could print a lot of money and until they charged their credit card up. It's kind of like nations at large had what I call like an uncharged credit card back in 1971 when they went off the gold standard. So they could build up all that debt until finally we reached the point of diminishing returns, and now it's negative returns. And as for central banks, they had relatively limited balance sheets until 2008, when they did what the world did from 71 to 2008. They did from 2008 to 2014. There's absolutely no cushion anymore. Absolutely no central bank in the world has the slightest bit of credibility. As you see in all of the currencies that are crashing, and gold exploding in multiple currencies around the world, and soon to be the dollar. And again, aside from a black swan, what I've said is my number one, I said for 2 years, my number one black swan potential was Greece. But aside from black swans, the number one thing that will finally make anyone who's still a believer that there's something left that could be saved is when what I call the Yellen Reversal occurs. And instead of raising rates, they come to the point where in total fear, they wind up, well, they can't lower rates, they can go negative, but going to QE4 because they're going to do it. I've been saying it all along. And when they do, there's not anyone left on earth who's going to realize that hyperinflation is not the end game. There won't be any gold left within a month. Or less when that happens. And frankly, the way things are going, I wouldn't be surprised if the Yellen reversal comes ironically just around the time when they're supposed to raise interest rates sometime in the first half of the year.
Yeah, they've been saying they're going to raise interest rates. They're going to raise interest rates. And I've always been a skeptic of it. I don't believe they can do it.
Of course they can't do it. And the best part is, look at the market. Look at the 10-year Treasury yield, which I write about every day. It's down today, another 8 basis points. It's 204. It's going, I've said it for The last year, when I wrote the most damning proof yet of QE failure back in May of last year, I said all of the major Western sovereign yields are going to go to zero. They're going to do, right now, Japan's is 0.3. I think Germany's 5-year yield went negative already. They're all going to go down there as money managers and institutions around the world, because they're in the business of buying things, will front run QE to infinity, all the way down to zero. Of course, eventually hyperinflation will destroy all those gains. But until then, that's exactly what's going to happen. So when anyone even talks about the Fed saying, well, we may raise interest rates a considerable time for now and we're being patient, look at the market. The market is saying that you're going to take rates down to negative.
Yeah, like in Europe, we have negative interest rates, and that is death for economies, for savers, for investment. I mean, you can't logically have negative interest rates and have it last for very long.
Yeah, it's record low sovereign yields now, including in some of the PIIGS that are going to default. I mean, forget Greece. Greece is one of the few whose rates are not low, because Greece may default on 400 billion euros of debt in the next month, as I said all along they would, because of course they have to. But we're talking about Italy, France. I mean, these are some of the most deadbeat, horrible economies, unemployment, social unrest, derivatives, exposure to Greece. I mean, they have all these problems. Venice is going to probably secede from Italy by year end, and they have interest rates at like 1 or 2%. So again, this is just front running. This is hot money, front running, the Bernanke put, the Draghi, whatever it takes, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem with these things, aside from what you said, it destroys economies and capital. It destroys confidence, whether you're a deflationist or an inflationist or whatever you want to call it. All of these actions cumulatively destroy the confidence in currencies. And I mean, I've said it all along. I went over in my year-end audio blog my predictions for last year. And last year I said I thought gold would go up, which it did in every currency other than the manipulated dollar gold. But I also said the dollar would dramatically strengthen, as much as I hate the U.S., because of exactly what happened in 2008. The dollar is not strengthening today because of the economy of the U.S. It's strengthening because of all-out fear of 2008 and beyond, because it's simply the most liquid asset out there. People don't want to own rubles.
Yeah. Right. You want to own rubles.
Euros, anything, right? Because the dollar is more liquid. And speaking of the euro today is trading at its lowest level in 9 years. And by the way, it's about to break down to its all-time lows from when the euro came into existence. And on top of that, the bigger irony is the Swiss franc. Not only is the peg about to break because it's right at the edge with the euro, but the Swiss franc is plummeting too. And Swiss franc price gold broke out today, as did euro gold, above 1,000 euros per ounce, which the cartel has been defending for the past 2 years. I mean, everything is falling apart everywhere. There's not a single shred of positive thing to say other than if you own physical gold and silver, you have the best shot of anyone on the planet of coming out of this with some kind of assets.
Hey, but you need a strategy, you need a plan, and physical gold and silver is only part of that plan. And how many times have we said that, Andy?
Of course. I mean, I'm talking, of course, from the financial end, right. But, you need to prepare, as we talk about always, Kerry, you prepare for the worst and you hope for the best. When it comes to financial, I mean, hey, it's your choice if you want to own 90% gold or 10% gold, or you want to own a house, or you want to own a mortgage or stock. Your choice. It's the protection continuum I've written. You have to be comfortable with what you do. But financially, if you don't own real money when all other money is collapsing, shame on you. And if you're not prepared for what happens to, for instance, the availability of food, the availability of protection, these kind of things during such times, then shame on you too. If you're listening to the show, you're one of the few people who are open-minded enough and actually still have a window of time to actually do something about it.
Yeah, here's a great story. In Yahoo, 29-year-old Russian hedge fund founder disappears with all the firm's money. How often do you think that's going to start happening in the not too distant future, Andy?
Well, in the U.S., there's no hedge funds left. Again, I worked for a hedge fund in what were the years, 96 to 98, and back then I said it was a scam. You're taking 20% of the profits and 1 or 2% of the funds just to do what everyone else does, which is just be 100% long when everyone else is 100% long. It's gotten so bad that in the last 3 years, and I wrote an article 3 years ago called Hedge Bombs, talking about their underperformance, that I think 95% of hedge funds underperformed the S&P 500 last year. And it's because they don't understand that these are rigged markets. Most stocks are down. The only ones that have been up are the ones that the manipulators are holding up, the PPT, the mainstream averages, and, a handful of other hot stocks, these Alibabas and whatever, the social media, et cetera, biotech. I mean, the most overvalued things in history. The hedge funds will be gone. And anyone that's not gone, of course, you're going to see embezzlement. You already see it on a daily basis with corporations with all their offshore funding. And, of course, the government, which just prints it and gives it to whoever they want. It's very, very scary. The world is only going to get scarier. And it's just a matter of if it's all at once where everything goes ablaze, or if it's serially, as we're seeing right now, from one Russian ruble crisis to the next. And it's funny, I was listening to Peter Schiff, and he was talking about how as bad as Bitcoin has done, you'd have done better in the Russian ruble last year than in Bitcoin. And certainly this year, Bitcoin's already done 15% to start the year.
I love it. Yeah, Peter Schiff. You can always count on Peter to put things in perspective, right?
Yeah, look, there's only a handful of us out there, even after all that's happened in the past 15 years, let alone the past 5 or 6 years, that actually, it's, to say the courage, I mean, yes, we have a little courage, but more importantly, we just have a little common sense. But, when you see the gradual growth of the Miles Franklin blog, I'm sure the growth of your network, more and more people keep reading and listening. And every time I get an email or see a new correspondence, I go, man, there's someone else or adding on the people that get it. And when it comes to gold and silver, there's so little of it out there in the world. It's so tight right now. We pretty much ran out in 2008. We have pretty much ran out of silver in 2011. And the next time we run out, I think that it's going to be permanently. I mean, when I say permanently, I mean at any prices anywhere near the current prices, you'll never be able to see another ounce. And that could be upon us right now, the way things are looking.
Oh, you never know. I mean, it's long past the point of no return. We've seen this thing happen over and over and over again. And really, there's just no way around this thing. It can't happen any other way. It's just a question of, will things blow up before they get to hyperinflate, in my opinion, Andy.
Right. Will there be a black swan that causes an implosion beforehand? And there sure could be. I mean, I wrote today the death of deflation, the death by deflation, I should say, because of, and David Stockman with his great deformation has described it best. I wrote an article the other day called The Most Direst Prediction of All about this. All of the massive, massive money printing of the last 40 years has set this in stone. And one of the worst consequences, ramifications, has been the massive overcapacity of industrial capacity that's unnecessary around the world, which portends, not just falling commodity prices. I think we're going to see levels on commodity prices that people just couldn't even imagine. He's talking about $20 oil. I believe it completely if we don't get to the hyperinflation first. If the Fed doesn't freak out because the Dow is falling and say we're doing QE4, we're going to do $80 billion a month, and literally confidence is lost and everything hyperinflates. But without that, I think we are in for perhaps decades of glut in the commodity field, generally speaking, in industrial capacity. And the funny thing is that it's the exact opposite in gold and silver, because while all that printed money was funneled into supporting business, supporting industrial commodities, it was also put into suppressing precious metals prices and capacity. So we are at a point where I think we're going to see, per our webinar that we did, somewhere close to 50% drop in silver production in the next 3 to 5 years, particularly if base metal prices continue to get whacked as well, which I believe they will. So I think it's really set in stone right now that, aside from an explosion of price because of exploding demand, there's not a chance that supply goes up anytime soon. And the triple whammy on that one is when gold and silver prices do finally break out, which of course they're going to, it's going to be because the cartel has lost control. And what that means is that the monetary understanding that the Germanys and Netherlands and Austrias and Belgiums are starting to talk about publicly will be understood by everyone in the world, which will mean that governments will start to think of it that way themselves and start to nationalize every mining project and every mine out there, which which will have the same effect as when PDVSA in Venezuela nationalized the oil industry back 15 years ago, completely paralyzing the business for decades to come. And speaking of paralysis, now that that gold and silver did end the year at 1180 and 1570 or whatever, it's set in stone that the write-offs that the gold and silver industry will have this year, which will be coming in the next 2 or 3 months, will make last year's pale in comparison. One of my predictions for this year is complete and utter paralysis of the mining industry just to survive, assuming we have this monster explosion of the price. So everyone is going to merge. Everyone's going to stop spending whatever they were spending anyway. They're already down 50% in their spending. And, it's going to become quite clear to the whole world that the supply-demand gap in gold and silver is as wide as anything on the planet.
Yeah, it's a complete implosion here of production. And so all those exploration companies just disappear, Andy?
Well, look, I wrote 2 years ago that half of all the miners would be gone, and they are. I mean, yes, for all intents and purposes, because there are still a bunch of them that sit around with shells trading for a penny a share and have no money. But I mean, I was in the mining industry from 06 to 11 before I joined Miles Franklin. And when I left in 2011, the mining industry was completely and utterly out of money. I'm talking about the juniors, which make all the discoveries. That was 3.5 years ago. Now it's 1,000 times worse. There is literally no money out there for exploration. And by the time prices go up and governments start to talk nationalization, there still won't be any money for exploration. There's been only one major discovery that I can think of in 15 years. And that one was Fruta del Norte in Ecuador, which will never be produced.
What happened there?
Yeah, the Ecuadorian government wants a 70% tax royalty on that, and they're never getting it.
Yeah. So the little guy here who's always takes it, right? What about the little guy?
But if you own gold and silver, you're not the little guy. I mean, if you own mining shares, you've been the little guy. You've been exploited by the same naked shorting that's used in every other paper market in the world. But if you hold physical gold and silver as your savings, not speculative investments like paper gold and silver and paper gold and silver mining shares, if you hold that as your savings, you are immune because they cannot create alchemy. They cannot create gold and silver. And there's already an historic mismatch. There's been for many years, but more so. Remember, 2013 was record demand for both metals. 2014 broke that record. That's how much naked shorting was going on and creating that much, there's that much open interest to buy metal that doesn't exist. Something is going to explode, and it's going to explode soon. And again, this oil price collapse, and again, it's not just oil. Look at the commodities across the board. The CRB index is within 14% or 13% now of its 2008 lows. That oil price, I wrote back in September, crashing prices portend unspeakable horrors. It will wipe out it already has at this price, wiped out the only industry in America that has had positive job growth in the past 7 years. It will wipe out the only profitable business, really, a real business, not creating financial derivatives and taking government money and you doing carry trades with the stock market and insider trading. It's eliminated the only business America has had, and it's eliminating it to the listeners everywhere permanently. It will never come back, the shale oil industry. Never, ever, ever.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt about that. And, so much for planned economies and other good stuff like that. It just can't work, right?
That's the great deformation that Stockman talks about. That's what I wrote about in the direst prediction of all. This production would never have come online. And again, it's not just U.S. shale. It's all high-cost production in the world. All of the money printing by the central banks and throw in the Wall Street having the ability to create all these financing schemes and derivatives and securitizations so that every marginal producer on the planet was able to drill for oil, just like every marginal home buyer was able to buy a house in the mid-2000s. How did that work out? And not to mention, every marginal stock buyer was able to buy stock back in 1999. It's the same thing, except again, this time around, we are so overly indebted, so overly glutted around the world with central banks so heavily, their balance sheets filled to the brim, so they have nowhere else to go except to utterly hyperinflate. That's where the world stands today. There's no turning back. Protect yourself now or financially die.
Yeah, you couldn't have put it any more succinct, any more eloquently, Andy. I mean, you got to do it. And ignore the nominal price, because if you look at the price, like you said, in euros, in yen, And in other currencies, it's trading at records. So
yeah. That was my article 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. It was called "The End of the Quote Gold Bear Market" because it's not a bear market. They viciously attacked it with paper for 3 years, and still it's hung in there. And on top of that, in all currencies, it was up on average 5 or 6% last year, and in Russia it was up 80 or 90%. And this year, forget it. We are already in 2 days seeing massive breakouts across the world in gold as the dollar explodes out of fear that we're going to have the next 2008, which it's not like we're going to have it. It's now. It is right now. We are right now in the middle of the biggest crash in economic activity in global history. It's happening this day, this minute, not next week, not 6 months, not a considerable amount of time, right now.
Yeah, that's what you really have to understand is, crash, it's happening now. It's not like it's right around the corner. It's now. And be prepared. You were told here. And, the recovery, I love when they talk about the recovery because I just haven't seen it. I don't know. Have you seen it?
Well, they recovered the price of the stock market. They recovered high-end real estate, where the people who are privy to that 1% money in the stock market spend it. And Maseratis and Porsches, they sold a lot of those to the 1%. But otherwise, this is as bad as it's been. Even the U.S. data. I mean, when you have a 38-year low in the labor participation rate, and I think it's more like 50 or 60-year low for men, I mean, you talk about a recovery of what? Real wages are at their lowest level in 2 decades and falling. And just look at what's going on in the screen right now with commodities, with stock prices, with bond yields. Every single day, the job outlook gets weaker. Every minute, the job outlook gets weaker. My God, oil is going to go through $50 today. It's $50.30.
Yeah, I saw it hit a low.
It's also going to go through 40. It's going to go through 30. It's going to break through the 2008 levels. People won't even believe it. But, I read an article last week that said right now, this is last week when oil was at the glorious price of 56 or 57, that a third of all the North Sea oil producers are going to go bankrupt right now. Here we are $7 later. Where are we going to be $15 later? I mean, I was an oil analyst 10 years. The same thing happened in the oil patch in the U.S. and in the North Sea back in the 1990s. Absolute devastation. Except then it was during a better economy. Here it's during the worst economy in history.
We know this. So anyways, hey, that's it for today. So take a look at Andy's work, milesfranklin.com. Subscribe to his daily missive along with Bill Halter's. Go over to financialsurvivalnetwork.com, subscribe to our newsletter, check out our webinars. And Andy, hey, best of luck this year, and I look forward to trying to break the truth to the people and get them to work and do something about it, and hopefully not get caught flat-footed by the tsunami that's heading your way. Right?
People better do it quick, and I wish the same to you and all your listeners as well.
Thanks, Andy. Talk to you next week.
Yep.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Every week the show is growing. Would you like to be a part of it? Then go to clubfsn.com and help support us with $1, $2, $5, or $10 a month and get a host of premium content with newsletters dropped into your mailbox, free books, private audio clips, webinars, and much more. Then join clubfsn.com. If you want to get ahead of the trend and ensure your family's financial security before it's too late, go to clubfsn.com and sign up.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.